I messaged you earlier also, sir. You didn't actually see, so
I
I
didn't see
messaged
that.
you again.
Luckily, I saw it. Because sometimes, eyes roam around.
Happens.
So,
No problem.
therefore, that important point made by Ramsey and insight is useful for us. And let us listen to Anil. Over to Anil.
Good morning, everyone. Uh, my name is Anil Kumar Katti. I'm doing PhD Political Science with Professor Patnaik. Uh, my research area, my title of my research is Dalits and Passive Revolution, study of Dalit movement in erstwhile Andhra Pradesh, which consists of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana from 1980 to present times. So passive revolution, basically the concept of passive revolution has been applied to study transition times, basically wherever there is a political change. Earlier, people like Sudipta Kaviraj, Ranajit Guha, or several others have actually studied political change. So drawing inspiration from these writings, especially Ranavir Samaddar has applied the concept to study uh, left front government in West Bengal from 1977 to 2011. So drawing inspiration from these writings, I have taken this concept as a framework, theoretical framework to study Dalit movement in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So that is tentatively my research area. So coming back to our discussion now, uh, the concept of passive revolution originally is actually not Gramsci's. Actually, it's actually Antonio Gramsci draws the concept of passive revolution from his uh, Neapolitan political Neapolitan. He's called Neapolitan political writer Vincenzo Cucco, who uses this term to describe how younger members of southern Italian aristocracy adopted French revolutionary ideas in the 18th century. So from him, actually, Gramsci takes this original idea. So Gramsci extends this concept by suggesting that revolutionary ideas and forms of organization can be pressed into the service of reactionary politics. So he defines passive revolution as restoration revolutions. Restoration revolutions. So passive revolution, in simple terms, actually, if you have to say, passive revolution is a revolution from above. So basically, there is no participation. Even if there is participation, it's passive participation of subalterns from below. So passive revolution is basically elite-driven revolution. It is also revolution. Passive revolution doesn't mean that it's not a revolution. It's a revolution, but passive in its nature. So he defines passive revolution as restoration revolutions. Distinctively in passive revolution, a revolutionary model of political organization and revolutionary political techniques are pressed into the service of conservative modernization project. So it's like in passive revolution, uh, revolutionary means are taken to achieve conservative ends. To put it shortly, revolutionary means are taken to achieve conservative means. So what happens is passive revolution is a paradoxical combination that way of conservative aims and revolutionary means. Passive revolutions resemble social revolution in the types of organizational actors that carry them out, but are similar to revolutions from above. As in social revolutions, political organizations rather than bureaucrats and notables are the main actors. So bureaucrats and these people become main actors. Yet, like revolutions from above, autocratic modernization, passive revolutions live intact and may even strengthen the social and political power of pre-existing dominant classes. So, at the outcome of the passive revolutions is the pre-existing dominant classes can be strengthened instead of withering away of pre-existing dominant classes. They may there is a possibility of strengthening of the dominance. because they have taken this revolutionary means. Thus, they do not issue a rapid, basic transformation of society, state, and class structures. Distinctively, passive revolutions are instances of use of revolutionary means of organization rather than bureaucratic power to achieve conservative modernization. So, to study, for example, to study any movement, any political upheaval, how do we see that there is there are traits of passive revolution. So there are key characteristics I have come up with. So these key concepts I have around 10 key concepts I have found. So I will explain those key characteristics to find out in any movement or any revolution or any revolt. There is a difference between revolt and revolution. So, or rebellion. So in any of these things, how do you find the characteristics of passive revolution? So first one is a passive revolution is a revolution without revolution. So it's a revolution without a revolution. A revolutionary model of political organization and revolutionary political techniques are pushed in to facilitate a conservative modernization project. So, as we discussed earlier, passive revolution is a paradoxical combination of conservative aims and revolutionary means. Passive revolutions leave intact and may even strengthen the social and political power of pre-existing dominant classes. It's a revolution that is directed from above by elites and occur without the active participation of masses. So the leading forces in this passive revolution are basically elites, and it can occur without the active participation of masses or subalterns. So a passive revolution is a historical process involving a set of gradual molecular changes in society. A passive revolution, in passive revolution, the leading groups exercise domination without leadership or dictatorship without hegemony. So there is only dominance. So for a proper hegemony, complete hegemony, you need to have both domination as well as leadership. In passive revolution, there is only dominance. There is a lack of leadership. In other words, it can be called as dictatorship without hegemony. So this he actually comes up, he comes to this conclusion by analyzing the relationship between Count Cavour and Mazzini, their relationship, and I mean, when they were working for the unification of Italy. So he studied their relationship. From there, he comes to the conclusion that in conservative party, that is more Count Cavour's party, there is dominance rather than leadership. From there, he draws this conclusion that in passive revolution, the leading groups exercise domination without leadership or dictatorship without hegemony. Through legislative intervention of the state and by means of corporate organization, relatively far-reaching modifications are being introduced into country's economic structure. So this is also one of the characteristics of passive revolution. This he draws from Americanism and Fordism. From there, he draws this characteristic. So, passive revolution is involved whenever relatively far-reaching modifications in country's economic structure are made from above through the agency of the state apparatus without relying on the active participation of the people. So in passive revolution, thesis becomes dominant and antithesis is rendered irrelevant. So these contending forces, thesis and antithesis, only thesis becomes dominant and antithesis becomes irrelevant, because thesis consumes antithesis in the process of, in the dialectical process actually. So thesis becomes dominant and antithesis becomes almost irrelevant. So consequently, thesis exercising dominance without hegemony observes the antithesis in order to stop a dialectical opposition. So when there is dialectical opposition from antithesis, thesis actually observes this aspect. Actually, you can see even in politics now. So opposition, the active forces in the opposition groups are actually absorbed into thesis, and therefore the elite groups, I mean, the intellectual groups are actually cut off from the revolutionary process. Thus, the revolutionary process becomes leaderless. So, antithesis becomes almost irrelevant. So this also he draws from Cavour and Mazzini. So Action Party and Moderate Party. So then the main advocates of radical demands are absorbed by traditional classes, and by this weaken the very prospects of radicalization of any movement, as the ruling class can make up for its limitations by using state power to neutralize and decapitate any emerging national popular bloc. So this also he calls as transformism. So in Italian, it is called transformismo. So these are the few key characteristics to analyze, because in Gramsci himself says that, this is the concept of passive revolution can be applied to any, political upheavals across the country. So this is not exclusive to Italian context, but in any context to study any movement, this concept can be applied. So that's how different people have applied this concept. So Gramsci's analysis of contrast between French Revolution and Italian Risorgimento led him to develop the concept of passive revolution. In the French Revolution, the Jacobians were able to mobilize the people for revolutionary struggle through supporting the demands of peasantry and building an alliance with them. So he draws comparisons with the French Revolution. The leading forces in French Revolution, the Jacobians, have actually formed an alliance with the peasantry, subaltern classes. And that's how, he regards French Revolution very highly, Gramsci actually. So through this, he actually compares, Italian Revolution, unification of Italy. So in French Revolution, actually, Jacobians actually mobilized in the revolutionary process, they mobilized peasantry and they formed alliance with peasantry, and that's how it becomes active revolution. In other words, it becomes active revolution. But same is missing in Italian Revolution. So that's where he analyzes the history of Italy, and that's where he comes that the traits of Jacobians is missing. Although in Action Party there were actually two contending forces: Moderate Party led by Count Cavour, and then Action Party led by Mazzini and Garibaldi. So Mazzini and Garibaldi are supposed to be radicals, and then Moderate Party are supposed to be conservatives. So even though Action Party was supposed to be radical, the Jacobian characteristics are missing in Action Party. So that's how they became, they got absorbed into, conservative Moderate Party led by Kaur. So this is where he draws, inspiration from French Revolution. In contrast, the unification of Italy and the rise of power of Italian bourgeois in the Risorgimento was carried out by Kaur and Moderate Party in a very different way. With a minimum reliance on popular struggles, their main instrument was Piedmont state with its army, its monarchy, and its bureaucracy. So Moderate Party relied more, instead of relying upon the popular struggles and the peasantry, it has relied more on Piedmont state-driven revolution, relied more upon Piedmont state with its army, monarchy, and aristocracy, ruling class, rather than relying upon subalterns, peasantry, and masses. While the liberal democratic current was represented by Action Party of Mazzini and Garibaldi, but it played a subordinate role to the moderates. So And the principal reason for this, as Gramsci says, was that it failed to develop a program reflecting the essential demands of popular masses, especially peasantry. Thus, the Action Party never succeeded in stamping the Risorgimento with a popular and democratic character. Instead, the moderates, with the aid of their own intellectuals, exercised a powerful, attractive force over intellectuals throughout the peninsula and succeeded in using national question to unite all the different sections of Italian bourgeois under their leadership. So over a period of time, what happened is moderates have actually absorbed all the active forces that were in Action Party using the national question and united all this. And what becomes is over a period of time, Action Party is there, but the leaders, intellectuals have been absorbed into moderate party, and that's how it becomes leaderless. So that's what happened. So moderates reinforced their ascendancy over Action Party by the method which became known as transformism. The gradual but continuous absorption achieved by methods which varied in their effectiveness of the active elements produced by allied groups and even of those which came from antagonistic groups. So even though they are supposed to be antagonistic groups, the active forces, active elements produced by Action Party have been absorbed. This we can see even in any movement, even now also the active forces in any party are being absorbed by different parties. So this you can apply in any context. For example, Gramsci says that in the period from 1860 to 1900, individual figures formed by democratic opposition parties were incorporated individually into the conservative moderate political class, characterized by its aversion to any intervention of the popular masses in state life. From 1900 onwards, entire groups from democratic opposition, that is Action Party, passed over into the moderate camp. Thus, the moderates established their hegemony over the Action Party and over the whole movement of Risorgimento. But the process of national unification and the rise to power of northern capitalists was achieved without relying on popular struggles. So instead of forming alliance with the peasants, they have observed the representatives, the so-called representatives of peasantry, that is Action Party. So instead of forming alliance with peasantry, they have formed with, in other words, you can call peasantry party. So party has been absorbed instead of people. So that's how they have, exercised their hegemony over the popular struggle. No attempt was made to coordinate the interests of peasants and of other subordinate classes with those of bourgeois so as to create a national popular collective will. The majority of the peasants remained under the influence of Roman Catholic Church, which was hostile to the new Italian state. The Risorgimento took the form of revolution from above. So this he calls revolution from above, because there is absence of participation of masses, carried out mainly through the agency of Piedmont state. The strategy adopted by Italian bourgeois had the character of a passive revolution. The moderates only established their hegemony over the Action Party. In other words, there was hegemony of part of capitalist class over the whole of that class, combined with an absence of hegemony over the peasants and the great majority of the population. So there was hegemony over Action Party rather than hegemony over the people. So because moderates think that the Action Party represents the peasants, so now moderate party doesn't have hegemony over the people, rather it has hegemony over the Action Party. So as Gramsci put it, there was dictatorship without the hegemony. So one aspect of passive revolution deserves a special emphasis. Referring to the role of Piedmont state, Gramsci says, the important thing is to analyze more profoundly the significance of Piedmont type function in passive revolutions. That is, the fact that a state replaces the local social groups in leading a struggle for renewal. In a passive revolution, the state is substituted for the political activity of the class. The greater the degree of passive revolution in any situation, the more does this process of substitution take place. In setting out Gramsci's analysis of Risorgimento, an extremely simplified picture of a very complex historical period has been given, very much more simplified than that given by Gramsci in prison notebooks. The people were not entirely passive in Risorgimento, which included many heroic episodes, such as risings in Milan and Rome in 1848 and 49, and Garibaldi's expedition to Sicily in 1860. But in its overall character, the Risorgimento was a passive revolution which did not have a national popular quality. Gramsci sums up the result. The leaders of Risorgimento were aiming at the creation of a moderate state in Italy, and in fact produced a bastard. So he says they were aiming at creation of a modern state in Italy instead, because it was actually thin hegemony. The hegemony was so weak that it becomes weak because there is no presence of popular struggles, no presence of subalterns. That's how the hegemony becomes thin, but still there is hegemony, there is dominance. Therefore, instead of creating a modern state, what actually modern party of cover have produced is bastard. In fact, what they produce is bastard. That's what Gramsci says. They did not succeed either in stimulating the formation of an extensive and energetic ruling class, or in integrating the people into the framework of the new state. The Italian bourgeois could only achieve a limited measure of hegemony, and the subsequent history of Italy was marked by a system of compromises which were unstable and lacking in popular support. Gramsci considered that the weakness of Italian liberal state founded by Risorgimento was one of the factors which made possible the rise of fascism in 1920s. So the rise of fascism, he sees, the traits of this fascism he sees in Italian Risorgimento, actually. So passive revolution prison notebooks. So when describing about and applying this concept in great detail, Gramsci seemed to use the term with at least two distinguishable and relatively separate meanings. The first, which was similar to Foucault's usage, indicated a revolution that was directed from above by elites and occurred without the active participation of the masses. The definition emerged out of Gramsci's account and critique of Italian Risorgimento, a process which had a passive character because of the decisions taken by the movement leaders. Gramsci's main example of passive revolution was the Italian Risorgimento, mainly. In his view, the unification of Italy was an instance of revolution restoration, in which the leading groups exercised domination without leadership. According to Gramsci, hegemony can be characterized as the spontaneous consent given by the great masses of the people to the general direction imposed on social life by the dominant fundamental group. Without such hegemony, the dominant group must rule on the basis of forces using the apparatus of state coercive power, which legally enforces discipline on those groups who do not give consent, either actively or passively. Gramsci argues that the bourgeois leaders of Risorgimento had to subordinate Italy's other leading political forces, the traditional ruling groups like the aristocracy and clergy, and win the active or passive assent of their auxiliaries in order to successfully unify the country. Therefore, Gramsci particularly emphasized the importance in Italy of binding together an allegiance of rural and intellectual classes. There has to be combination of both, the allegiance of both intellectuals as well as rural masses. So in order to, what Gramsci proposes is that in order to create a modern state, so what is Gramsci's solution? So this is what actually moderate party of Cavour have done. So what is Gramsci's solution? What should have happened in Italian state is that in order to create a modern state, the Italian bourgeois had to win the support of popular classes. It was their failure either to establish their hegemony over the aristocracy or to gain the active consent of masses that caused a passive revolution in Italy. Throughout his analysis, Gramsci contrasted Italy's unification with French Revolution. Whereas the Jacobians carried out a radical program and gained a mass following, the Italian nationalists, including Mazzini of Action Party, were afraid to give in to popular demands like agrarian reforms in Italy. So rural masses were asking for agrarian reforms, including Action Party, not only moderate party, including Action Party could not give in to rural masses' demands of agrarian reforms. So in France, Jacobians were successful in binding the town and country together. They were able to impose themselves, at least temporarily, on the bourgeois, leading to a much more advanced position in which they were able to make a bourgeois the leading hegemonic class and create compact modern French nation that was missing in Italian Revolution. By contrast, in Italy, the leading classes said they were trying to produce a modern state, but in fact produced a bastard, in which the bourgeois were still subordinated to the aristocracy. Gramsci argued that if the Action Party had incorporated the demands of popular masses into the government, they would not have been politically subordinated to Cavour's more conservative modern party. Thus, the passivity of Risorgimento emerged from the fact that the Action Party ought to have allied itself with the rural masses, especially those in the south. So, and ought to have been more Jacobean, not only in external form, in temperament, but more particularly in socio-economic content. So John Davis, scholar, has argued that passive revolution can be used to explain the long period of continuity of Italian history from unification to fascism. Gramsci himself discussed these molecular changes in terms of transformism, which was one form of passive revolution. So, what is the role of a revolutionary party? So Gramsci argues that a social group can, and indeed must already exercise leadership before winning governmental power. So what requires more is leadership. So if party's emphasis is more on governmental power, it doesn't succeed. So before achieving government power, what Gramsci suggests is that the party should exercise leadership before winning governmental power. This moral and intellectual leadership is also known as hegemony, one of the key terms associated with Gramsci. Gramsci situated hegemony on the opposite pole of direct domination of the state's coercive power. Thus, hegemony can be described as consent given by the great mass of people to the general direction imposed on social life by the dominant fundamental group. In this formulation, hegemony, consent, or direction are replaced opposite to domination and coercive force. In a passive revolution, a new ruling class occupies its position on the basis of domination without leadership. So in passive revolution, there is only domination. There is no leadership. By contrast, in active revolutionary party, what active revolutionary party must do is it must obtain both leadership as well as domination by directly obtaining hegemony among the masses. Gramsci went into great detail when describing the appropriate form of a revolutionary party, what he calls the modern prince. The party must work towards the formation of national popular collective will and asserts assert its own hegemony over society. While Gramsci stressed the importance of a leadership as a cohesive and directive force, he also emphasized the importance of democracy within the party. So it's not uh, leadership alone is not enough. He also emphasizes more on the democracy within the party. So when you form a historic bloc, it's not enough that negotiation is over. You have to constantly see that democracy is formed, democracy is exercised and practiced within the party. So moreover, the relationship between the leaders and people should be an organic one. There should not be, masses should not be alienated from leaders. Masses should be, the relationship between masses as well as leaders should be a very organic one. In the Italian Risorgimento, the leaders had a paternalistic attitude towards lower classes and therefore had limited success in gaining any sort of hegemony among the popular masses. So he again goes back to Italian Risorgimento. In Italian Risorgimento, the relationship between leaders and masses is that leaders exercised a paternalistic attitude towards lower classes. So that was the limitation in Italian Risorgimento. And he says that, the modern prince, the political party, basically of communist party, should not exercise this kind of paternalistic attitude. And then the relationship should be more of organic rather than paternalistic. Gramsci argued that as an irreducible fact, there really do exist rulers and ruled, leaders and led. However, he also emphasized the importance of gaining effective leadership not by demanding automatic obedience, but by always questioning the responsibility of leaders in any defeat or disaster. So there is the fact that there are rulers and ruled. There is leader and led, but it doesn't mean that leaders should not be. It doesn't mean that leaders should not be questioned. There has to be always a scope for leaders to be questioned, and that whenever, especially there is a defeat and disaster, the effective leadership should be always ready for that critical questioning. So even if it comes from masses or rural classes, lower classes. Therefore, while Gramsci acknowledged the importance of leadership to the political party, he also emphasized the democratic leadership, democratic relationship, which must exist among the different levels of popular revolutionary movement. He argued that there can only be a relationship of representation when there is both sentimental and knowledge-based bond between leaders and led. There has to be sentimental and a knowledge-based bond between leaders and led. In absence of such a relationship, the link becomes purely bureaucratic and formal. When there is no such relationship, sentimental feeling of passion and knowledge-based bond between masses and leaders, what becomes the relationship becomes more of purely bureaucratic and formal. It's just like any office job. Your leadership becomes your job. So it should not be like that. So after this, we'll go into how this concept of passive revolution has been applied in various contexts. First, we will deal with international politics, how in international politics, the concept of passive revolution has been applied as a theoretical framework. And then we'll come to Indian context. So I'll not deal much with international politics. I'll just give you references so that you can later go back to those studies. With regards to Indian politics, I'll deal much more broader sense. So in passive revolution, passive revolution and its theoretical application in international politics. So there are different people, different scholars have applied this concept to study different state formations across the world. So some of those works are, I'll read out a few works. There is a work titled From Passive to Radical Revolution in Venezuela Popular Project. by Rand branding. So he has applied to study radical revolution in Venezuela. So this is one study. There is another study from which is titled From Passive Revolution to Silent Revolution, Class Forces and the Production of State, Space and Scale in Modern Mexico by Chris Hesketh. So he has studied about modern Mexico, how the class forces and production of state formation of modern Mexico. Then there is another study, passive revolution and the dynamics of social change in the peripheries by Kamel Burak Tansel, to analyze the case of late Ottoman Turkish state formation. So this concept of passive revolution was applied to study Turkish state formation, Ottoman Empire. Then there is another study which is titled Spaces of Uneven Development and Class Struggle in Bolivia, Transformation or Transformismo by Chris Hesketh. This study engages with the politics of class struggle and state formation in modern Bolivia. Then Victory of Popular Forces or Passive Revolution, a Neo-Gramscian perspective on democratization by Rita Abrahamson. This study it's a study of a transition to democracy in sub-Saharan Africa. Then there is another study which is titled Revolution Without Movement, Movement Without Revolution, comparing Islamic activism in Iran and Egypt. So this is by Asif Bayat. So there are several other studies, but tentatively these are studies that I have come across. There is another study also comparing Indian nation struggle and Italian Revolution. Passive revolution and its theoretical. We'll come back to Indian context now. Passive revolution and its theoretical application in Indian politics. A number of prominent scholars have adopted Gramsci's concept of passive revolution to the Indian context. But then here I will examine primarily 4 scholars. Those 4 scholars are Sujita Kaviraj, Christoph Leisten, Ranajit Guha, and Ranabir Samadar. So these 4 scholars have extensively applied this concept of passive revolution to study mainly Indian national movement. And Ranabir Samadar basically studies passive revolution. His book is Passive Revolution in West Bengal. So he studied about the left front government after its coming to power in 1977 till its overthrow in 2011. So that's a different side. That's I think for the first time a scholar has applied this concept to study left struggles in India. Each of these authors use different aspects of Gramsci's theories to interpret the Indian situation. Many prominent scholars studying India's nationalist movement have applied. So this is actually all these works. This is actually part of my literature review. So that's how I have come across these people. So many prominent scholars studying India's nationalist movement have applied Gramsci's concept of hegemony and passive revolution to this subject. Perhaps it is significant that Gramsci himself noted that both Gandhism and Tolstoyism were naive theorizations of the passive revolution with religious overtones. So he, at that point of time, in prison itself, he said, Gandhism and Tolstoyism are naive theorizations of passive revolution with religious overtones. Whether because of this comment or because of the natural fit between Gramsci's theories and Indian situation, many others have come to describe Indian independence as a passive revolution. Here, I will outline 3 examples of some prominent and well-developed applications of Gramscian theory to India. Although one could mention many others who have made similar arguments, a few examples should be enough to sketch the general lines of analysis. So, political scientist Sujita Kaviraj has argued that after independence, a passive revolution occurred among the Indian political elites during the Nehru period. In particular, he argues that the bourgeoisie was unable to create a successful democratic revolution in India under its direction alone and had to resort to coalitional strategy. So what Kaviraj says is that they could not successfully create a democratic revolution in India after it attaining independence. So this is actually post independence. So what Congress and Nehru government have done is they have entered into coalitional politics, coalitional strategy of rule. So therefore, which means that they could not exercise complete hegemony over people. That's why they had to enter into coalitional strategy. So this the hegemony over people is partial. 3 different Indian classes belong to this ruling coalition: the bourgeoisie, the rural landed elites, and the bureaucratic management elite. So this is very important. So what is this ruling coalition that Nehru and Congress have aligned with? These are bureaucrats, then rural landed elites, and then basically feudal lords, in other words. But then in a sophisticated terms, he puts it as rural landed elites. And then bureaucratic management elites. Kaviraj claims that after independence, the Indian National Congress was altered with the gradual departure from the party of many socialists. Most of them formed. One second, I will. My charging is low. So after independence, Kaviraj claims that Indian National Congress was altered with the gradual departure from party of many socialists, most of whom formed relatively ineffective and regionally limited opposition groups. Subsequently, Nehru and his left-wing comrades felt themselves to be an encircled minority among the conservative state and local Indian National Congress units. This minority eventually accepted that what Kaviraj sees as a capitalist passive revolution. In the Nehru period, when further serious land reforms and other radical programs were abandoned, he argues that this passive revolution could have been avoided if the Indian National Congress had encouraged mass mobilization and had used mobilization levels already achieved for radical purposes. So what he says is, during colonial times, before British left India, there was a lot of mobilization of ordinary masses for attaining political independence. But after attaining political independence, the same mobilization was not applied for achieving radical purposes. For example, land reforms or a question of social justice. So such kind of mobilization did not actually take place. Rather, they relied upon, bourgeoisie, they relied upon rural landed elites, bureaucrats, and state to, in fact, reduce those radical formations. The same mobilization should have been applied by Indian National Congress to achieve these radical purposes, especially land reforms. So, however, he argues that Indian National Congress had decided upon the bureaucratic rather than mobilization form of its reforms. Upon gaining power in independent India, the Indian National Congress strategy was to demobilize its own movement rather than radicalize it further. So, the amount of mobilization that happened during Indian national struggle, the same amount of mobilization did not take place after attaining independence. Rather, what Kaviraj says is they have demobilized. They have demobilized these masses. They have demobilized its own movement instead of radicalizing it further for its for attaining social justice or implementing land reforms or any other developmental activities. So they demobilized its own movement. So he argues that in principle, feudal and conservative resistance could have been overcome if the Indian National Congress had been willing to encourage popular action by using the levels of mass mobilization already achieved in 1947 and 1948 for the radical purposes in their stated aims. Their failure to do so produced a capitalist passive revolution and meant the abandonment of parties' programs for radical change and redistributive justice. So this he calls, this strategy of Congress of demobilizing its own movement, he calls it as passive revolution. So instead of radicalizing the movement further, they have re-radicalized the movement, and this he calls as capitalist passive revolution. Kaviraj's argument is compelling in terms of the coalition strategy of rule that he identifies for the Indian National Congress. His argument that the bourgeois could not direct the movement on its own, but had to resort to a class alliance is similar to Gramsci's analysis of Italian Risorgimento. Just like the conservative, the moderate party of Cavour, they relied upon Action Party and then landed elites. The same way, Indian National Congress also has relied upon the alliance politics. They relied upon bureaucracy. They relied upon rural elites. The same way, the conservative party, moderate party of Italian Risorgimento. In both examples, the leading elites created a passive revolution because of their refusal to mobilize the Indian population for a radical program of reform. However, Kaviraj's account is limited to the extent that it does not address Indian National Congress tactics and ideology before independence. Arguing that after independence, there were quick political changes in internal alignments within the party, Kaviraj asserts that Congress, which assumed power in 1947, was not the Congress in many respects that won the independence. So Congress of post-independence is completely different from Congress that achieved independence. So while there may be much truth to this claim, Kaviraj overlooks the extent to which Indian National Congress policy and strategy had worked towards a passive revolution well before independence. In his focus on bureaucratic management and economic structures, Kaviraj neglects the important domain of ideology and forms of social mobilization, so important to Gramsci's argument. Therefore, while Kaviraj's argument is compelling, so he has also provided a partial account of passive revolution in India. So then comes Christoph Leisten. He argues that, so his book is Labor and Capital. So the earlier book, I mean, Sudipto Kaviraj's book, the limits of passive revolution. So the book is the trajectory of Indian nation. Then Christoph Leisten's book is Labor and Capital. So in his book, Christoph Leisten argues that from its very beginning, Indian National Congress was formed with the intention of preventing a radical mass movement. So he actually deviates from Kaviraj, and he says that from the beginning of what Kaviraj says is that post-independence Congress is different. The pre-independence Congress is different and post-independent Congress is different. In pre-independent Congress, has been mobilizing masses to overthrow British rule. And after attaining independence, it has demobilized people who were asking for radical land reform and social justice questions. In the same way, Christoph Leisten says that the Congress of pre-independence is also not different. So he says that from the inception of Congress, it has been preventing radical mass movement. So that's the argument Christoph Leisten says, puts forward. In his view, the passive revolution in India dates from this founding in 1885 itself and was carried out by an enlightened bourgeoisie attempting to organize long-term consent to the existing order. Leisten describes the increasing involvement of labor within Indian National Congress between the Swadeshi movement and the end of World War I. However, labor's political involvement was cut short by Gandhi, who believed that industrial labor should remain aloof from political action. So he blames Gandhi that, industrial labor should be cut off from political action, and then he discouraged laborers to participate in Indian national struggle. According to Leisten, the uniqueness of Gandhi lies in the fact that he, unlike many other nationalist leaders, realized that a passive revolution, that is a revolution which gradually increases the share of the economic and political power of contending Indian bourgeoisie within the otherwise unchanging system, necessarily excluded the active involvement of working class. So Gandhi himself actually demobilized masses. This is the argument of Leisten, not my argument. So he says that he discouraged masses and excluded their active involvement in Indian national struggle. While Indian National Congress realized that labor could make important contributions to the freedom struggle and eventually incorporated it into the Indian National Congress just before non-cooperation movement. And later they realized that labor is very much important and it could contribute a lot for freedom struggle. And later in 1919 and 1922, after during non-cooperation movement, then only they included labor into the Indian national struggle. Before that, actually, there was discouragement from the part of Indian National Congress. The party also worked to contain labor activism within the safe sphere of national politics. Leisten analysis extends up to the Gandhi-Irwin Pact in 1934, arguing that the lasting effect of this argument was to provide Indian National Congress with a political and economic outlook which would enable it to rally. How much time we have, sir? 12, 46. Half an hour?
The class is up to 1:30, but you can give some time for discussion.
Yes. By 1:15, I'll close.
Okay.
This is basically my literature review. Concluding that the transfer of power was accomplished by a passive involvement of masses, Leisten argues that Gandhi worked in the interests of big bourgeoisie and the feudal elements in Indian society. Eventually, even Nehru was converted to this program, leading to the establishment of an independent state in which power was shared among the bourgeoisie, the feudal elements, and foreign capital. So, basically what Leisten argues is that Gandhi, even though he's considered to be, there are arguments and counter arguments with regards to the hegemony exercised by Gandhi during Indian national struggle. But what Leisten says is that Gandhi has actually worked for the big bourgeoisie and feudal elements in the Indian society. And eventually, even though Nehru was not with him initially, later even Nehru was incorporated in this project, in this program, leading to the establishment of an independent state in which power was shared among the bourgeoisie. There was no, power was not shared with the masses. It was shared only among the bourgeoisie and feudal elements. That's how, Congress has created local hegemons in different states. If you see, in Andhra Pradesh, you have Reddy dominance. Reddys have, feudal elements have been given share of power. So in the same way, in different states, they have created local hegemons and shared power along, with them. And there was no share of power with ordinary masses. So this is the argument that Leiston puts forward. Leighton argument contradicts many of the basic assumptions of Kaviraj actually. Unlike the latter, Leighton situates the origins of India's passive revolution in the very formation of Indian National Congress. Although his main narrative leaves off at 1934, Leighton attempts to trace a relatively direct line in Indian National Congress policy from these beginnings to the character of Indian independent state created in 1947. Like Kaviraj, Leighton argues that Indian bourgeoisie resorted to a coalitional strategy of rule. However, in his argument, their partners are the country's feudal elements and foreign capital, rather than the rural landowning elites and bureaucratic management elites. Leighton is far from specific about the composition of feudal elements, but it seems reasonable to presume that, at least in part, they were the same interests as the rural landowners in Kaviraj's account. Then Bipin Chandra and co. et al. In India's struggle for independence from 1857 to 1947 argues that nationalist movement under Gandhi was a hegemonic struggle that combined the strategies of war of position and war of maneuver. Gramsci also argued that the Indian nationalist movement encompassed war of position, war of movement, and underground warfare. So this Gramsci himself acknowledges that actually Gandhi's struggle had these three components, components: war of position, war of movement, and war of maneuver, which he calls underground warfare. However, just as Leighton exaggerates the extent to which Indian National Congress leaders were responsible for Indian passive revolution, Bipin Chandra neglects the many aspects of Gandhi's policies that were not progressive. So Bipin Chandra's arguments are one-sided. So he did not emphasize much of Gandhi's policies which are not progressive. Although he is correct to argue that struggle, truce, struggle, rhythm of Indian National Congress policies gradually moved the nation towards independence, he ignores that the Indian National Congress truces with the colonial government were often gained by abandoning more radical but still attainable aims. That there was a passive character to both sides of the movement because party leadership had mobilized the masses to strive for goals primarily in the interests of Indian social elites. Then coming to Ranajit Guha, he does not explicitly use the term passive revolution. His argument engages with many of the related concepts within Gramsci's theories. Guha's account tends to describe the passive nature of the nationalist struggle for independence. He argues that, unlike the metropolitan democratic state, the colonial state in India rested primarily on coercion rather than persuasion, and thus was an instance of dominance without hegemony. Moreover, the Indian bourgeoisie was also unable to speak for the nation or to win a hegemonic role for itself. The Indian National Congress and Gandhi in particular used discipline rather than persuasion. So he used, there are many scholars who have written regarding this nature of disciplining the, what is it? the strategy of disciplining in Gandhi rather than using the strategy of persuasion in mobilizing the masses. What Guha describes as an attempt to settle for dominance without hegemony. Guha argues that Gandhi elaborated a set of secular and spiritual controls in order to harness and discipline the masses. So this same argument is actually made by several other scholars also, because with regards to Dalit movement also, when Dalits have actually asked for a temple entry movement, and then several other things, Gandhi has actually asked, he actually used this disciplinary measures on Dalits. He asked them not to eat meat. He asked them to be clean. He asked them to be, not to consume alcohol. This as if it was their, in other words, he has, it can be interpreted that he has put the blame on Dalits only. You are not being allowed to enter into temple because you are looking dirty. You are eating meat. So the responsibility lies on Dalits rather than the upper caste. So he tries to discipline Dalits. So the same argument is put forward by Guha. So when he says that Gandhi elaborated a set of secular and spiritual controls in order to harness and discipline the masses. According to Guha, crowd control was the form of secular discipline elaborated by Gandhi. In order to ensure mass movements operated in a sober and methodological manner. Gandhi emphasized the training of volunteers to enforce crowd control and act as the people's policemen. Even more fundamental to Gandhi was the notion of self-discipline or self-control. Guha argues that Gandhi gave non-cooperation the resemblance of religious movement with the development of comprehensive morality based on abstinence and purification. According to Guha, discipline was necessary because the subaltern masses that were brought into Indian National Congress campaigns operated according to different political idioms and a different type of discipline than the middle class activists. So during independent struggle, the subalterns had actually formed their own ways of mobilization, their own ways of fighting British. So in order to bring all of them under Indian National Congress leadership, he had to use these disciplinary measures to incorporate these subaltern masses under the umbrella of Indian National Congress. This is what Guha says. Like others in subaltern studies groups, Guha argues that in India, two separate and parallel political domains existed, that of subalterns and that of the elite. Gandhi worked out a series of regulations and controls to contain mass initiative and radicalism, expressed in peasant insurgency, urban strikes and riots, etc., in order to bring popular agitations under the fold of party's bourgeois leadership. Although it contains many compelling arguments regarding Indian National Congress tactic of mobilizing the population for elite interests and under elite control, Guha's formulation of dominance without hegemony is much too simplistic and ignores the complexities within the Indian national political situation. So while both Kaviraj and Leighton emphasize that Indian ruling classes resorted to coalition strategy of rule, Guha maintains that struggle for independence was a bourgeois movement that failed to capture the hegemony of masses. Significantly, all three authors, Kaviraj, Leighton, and then Guha, three authors agree that passive revolution resulted from Indian National Congress leaders' failure, because of their leaders' failure to mobilize the masses on a radical program that answered popular demands for social and particularly economic change. Kaviraj argues that such a mobilization in 1950s would have prevented the passive revolution, while Leighton and Guha both focus on mobilization strategy that subordinated the masses to Indian National Congress leadership during the independence struggle, rather than working with them to change Indian social structures and economies. So what this is actually in consonance with what Ambedkar also says, that when there is argument between Nehru and Ambedkar himself says that he was pressing on the social reform, he was pressing on social democracy and so on, and then he was raising questions to Muslim League as well as Indian National Congress to address the caste question. Then during independence, Indian national struggle, and he was also attending roundtable conferences and so on. But then Indian National Congress, especially Nehru, these people said, first let's attain independence, and after attaining independence, we'll look into internal matter. Caste question is an internal matter, and we will discuss about these things, and we will reform this caste discrimination after attaining independence. So Guha and Co actually they deal with the mobilization strategy of Indian National Congress. So this is in resonance with what Ambedkar also was speaking during that time. Then comes Ranavir Samadar. So Ranavir Samadar in his book Passive Revolution in West Bengal from 1977 to 2011 has tried to interpret West Bengal since the formation of left front government in 1977. He interpreted the broad phenomena of regime change through daily events by applying Gramsci's framework of passive revolution. He reflects on some critical issues during 1980s and 1990s, though many would consider this period to be golden age of left front rule. These years have witnessed economic and political reforms such as partial land reforms. So what Ranavir Samadar says is that, see, the book Passive Revolution in West Bengal, this is not, these are basically articles that were published in different magazines. So these articles, it's like political journalism. What Samadar does is political journalism. So he, being an academic as well as an activist, he was observing the left front government since its formation. So from time to time, he has published different articles observing left front government. Therefore, all these articles have combined into a book form. That that book is titled Passive Revolution in West Bengal. So first 10 years of left front government, that is from 80s to 90s. Usually people think that it's a golden rule of left front government. So after that, actually what left has done. So during those 10 years of its formation, it has taken partial land reforms, unemployment compensation scheme, payment of bonus, dearness and other allowances to salaried class, implementation of Panchayat Raj system, expansion of primary education, etc. These were achieved in the first 10 years of left front government. But this new inclusive society was built by including the corrupt and murderous officials of old regime. So after 10 years, after attaining, after getting power in 1977, even though there were partial land reforms, but over a period of time, in the name of stability, what left front government has done is it has recruited many murderous officials of old regime. So they did not create entirely different government. Although left spoke of revolution, that till there was instability till 1977 under the rule of Congress and then Bangla Congress. So after that, actually left front was actually assuring stability of government, but then they wanted to create something new in West Bengal. But instead, what they have created, what they have brought is, murderous officials from old regime only. It is nothing new. The same old people have been brought into new regime. That's what Samadar says. And then over a period of time, party substituted for society, local bosses working as local barons substituted for the party. Party committee substituted for government's intelligence wing. inviting speculative and comprador capital appeared as steps towards organic industrialization of the state, and protests began to be considered as conspiracies against left rule. So what left, so any protest that happens against left rule, because left is also not, he's basically speaking of CPM. There were also other shades of left, like radical left and ultra left. So when there are protests from this left also, they were always telling people that this is a conspiracy to overthrow left front government. So instead of addressing those grievances, it has always, through their propaganda, they have always said that, left front government, it's a strategy, it's a conspiracy to overthrow left front government. So left front government promises of giving in a new government that is different from Congress government has not been anything new. That's what Samadar says. The excluded must not protest too much. So what left front has done over a period of time is that the excluded people must not protest too much. They should keep hope on stability. So the stability that they assured from Congress, and then in order to assure that stability, they should keep that hope on stability, because if stability could be ensured, inclusion would be possible. In the midst of this, what has been the impact of this new regime of governmentality and democracy? Democracy came to signify stability in contrast with anarchy under Congress misrule. So old injustices were left unaddressed, again on the plea that new age was coming. It's just like Modi saying that Achedin, just like Achedin. So the new left kept telling that, the old injustice will be addressed, but they were never addressed. Again on the plea that a new age was coming, and hence the state needed stability. So in order to have stability as left government, what people should do? You elect left government again and again, so that left government will assure you stability. So only on the basis of stability, they kept winning elections on the plank of stability. So showing Congress as evil. So steady progress could be achieved, and stability meant stability of the party. What is the stability that left front was speaking? That stability is not stability of state, the stability of party. That's what Ramadar says, of the party-led government and of the party-led society. In this mire of stability, vitality was soon lost, because stability was not attained through hard policy choices, but by negotiation at all levels between parties, levels, units, individuals, groups, classes, and governments. The strategy worked for nearly 20 years, but so all kinds of artificial methods to achieve both ends, such as allowing corruption. In order to get that stability, what left front government has done is it has allowed corruption, use of strong arm tactics, and transformation of party into a syndicate emerged as part of this situation, making left front government a victim of its success. So what left front was actually, it has promised that it will fight against these things, this syndicate, this corruption, this strong armed forces of state. But what actually happened is, after attaining power, the same forces that they fought against, they have used to suppress dissent. They have used to suppress radical left parties also, in order to suppress opposition. There was no authority. It declined to impose as a master of people. The left front was the last to admit its innocent birth, because it wanted to be in the ranks of the rulers. This created new inequalities between those who were representatives and those who were not, those who were party followers and those who were not. Intellectuals have forgotten that, after all, the left front rule began in 1977 with the task of normalizing a society reeling under attempts at revolution and ruthless counter-revolution, marked by the deaths of hundreds of revolutionaries in 10 years. preceding the power. In short, left front renounced politics of transformation and opted a stable society. So here, once, in order to recall the words of late Chief Minister Jyoti Basu, that the left front had come to power, he says, the left front has come to power not to carry revolution forward, but to give a clean and good government to people of the state. It would be pro-people government. At the same time, it would also offer clean conditions of investment to industrialists. It would clean up the working conditions for investors. And finally, the workers would be able to protest because their full trade union rights would be restored, but they would not be allowed to cross the line of permitted dissent. So this is what Jyoti Basu said. So workers have been given full rights to form trade unions, and they are given full rights, but they should not protest more. So they would be allowed to protest only minimally because their trade union rights are restored, but they should not cross the line of permitted dissent. So this good, clean, pro-people government would not tolerate attempts to carry revolution forward. So what left front government said, they were supposed to carry revolution forward because they called the formation of left front itself a revolution. So they are supposed to carry forward the revolution. So rather, and then what they have achieved, what Ranavir Samadar says is that what left front thinks is that they have already achieved revolution, and any other dissent, any other political parties or movements attempt to form revolution will be curbed because they themselves have attained revolution. Industry died in large measure in 80s and first decade of 1990s when West Bengal went through a massive phase of deindustrialization, with jute, textiles, and engineering units being declared as sunset industries. Endless attacks on jobs and complete surrender by organized trade union movements to retrenchments, layoffs, lockouts, and closures resulted in massive setback to workers' movement, with the left front government remaining a passive witness or a facilitator. So, likewise, in Panchayat, big bosses at district and subdivision levels became corrupt wheel dealers, prosperous farmers, men of substance, and rural gentry became political class in the villages of Bengal. Student unions bosses became parallel power centers, extracting fees and other contributions, while teacher association bosses controlled recruitment of teachers at every levels. Deals were negotiated through party functionaries, and when capping all this, land grab began. Food production reached stagnation. Destitute villagers started committing suicide. Left front had no one to blame for the idea of good and clean government crashing down. It had only to blame itself. Populism has reached its limits. This is an intriguing experience of how democracy can transform into oligarchy. So, in order to, instead of giving democracy, what left front has turned out after 27 years of their rule was that it has finally become oligarchy instead of democracy. So then there are several other things that Samadar says. This book is an interesting read on the politics of left front till 2011. So since we are short of time, and I'll take for quick 5 minutes, I'll deal with the passive revolution. There is an interesting work actually done by John Russa. Actually, he has done work on Telangana armed struggle. He has done, Professor Atluri Murali has supervised him. He's from Indonesia. So he has done a work. It's titled Passive Revolution Meets Peasant Revolution, Indian Nationalism and the Telangana Revolt. So this is a study of Telangana armed struggle. So to put it shortly, what Indian National Congress and left parties during that time, they were fighting against Nizam state because Nizam was not acceding to Indian Union. in 1947. After India attained independence, Hyderabad remained as a princely state for 1 year, one and a half year actually. So during that time, for that short period of 1 year, there were there was armed struggle in Telangana actually. So this person Rusa actually studies about this Telangana armed struggle, and then in his conclusion, what he draws is that um, Congress and CPI actually, at the time CPI was actually working hand in glove to fight against Nizam. But then over a period of time, when Congress realized that left was gaining strength in villages from among the masses, Congress realized that left has become a threat for the growth of Indian National Congress. So after attaining independence, after overthrowing Nizams, their immediate attack was shifted from Nizam to left government, not left government, CPI actually. So instead of taking them forward, taking them into account, taking them together in the struggle, what Congress has done is it has betrayed their own comrades actually. So this he calls as a passive revolution. So the Congress resisted immediate changes in the class structure and wished to postpone such changes until after independence. Once a constitutional, popularly elected government was in power, in this strategy of deferral, the Indian peasants were to be passive concerning their often urgent material needs for land. The Congress version of a staged theory of revolution, first national independence and then redistribution of property. That's the strategy that Congress followed. First, all have to fight for Indian national independence, and then we'll come to redistribution of property. But while left was asking for redistribution of property in the beginning itself.
Also justice, not merely property, just social justice.
Yeah, justice also. I'll quote one statement by Patel during that time, and then I'll conclude this session. Hyderabadis were being terrorized by Nizam's police and paramilitary squads. Prime Minister Nehru initially refrained from ordering the Indian army to invade. He was preoccupied with Kashmir and fighting with Pakistan. Worried about the effect an invasion of Muslim state would have a Hindu-Muslim relations in India, and concerned about negative reactions from other countries, Nehru signed an agreement with Hyderabad in late November 1947, the Standstill Agreement, that granted Hyderabad 1 year of de facto independence until the state's political status could be permanently determined through further negotiation. Wishing to avoid military intervention, Nehru hoped that the year of standstill agreement, that one particular year, would provide the opportunity for the Nizam to reconsider his position and come to a compromise. Despite the Indian government's signature on the agreement, the state Congress leftists were opposed to it and refused to consider themselves bound by its terms. The Committee of Action in Bombay wished to overthrow Nizam's regime. So instead of following that standstill agreement, the Committee of Action in Bombay wished to overthrow Nizam regime by a mass movement from below, rather than rest content with the sentiments between diplomats of Hyderabad and Delhi. While affirming its trust in the Indian government's commitment to integrate Hyderabad with India, the committee action demanded that negotiations with fascist regime in Hyderabad should forthwhile come to an end. The communist position was also no different. The party's national leaders claimed that the standstill agreement only allowed the Nizam's breathing space to organize the repression of the mass movement. Instead of pursuing negotiations with the Nizam's regime, the communists called upon Delhi to give its full support to combined Congress-Communist revolt from below against the regime. So, although the orders came from Nehru that the standstill agreement should stop this fight against Nizam, but the Congress Party and Communist Party, the local leaders have gone against the Nehru agreement. Then Nehru and Patel were alarmed in early months of 1948 with the increasing power of the communists in Telangana. The unintentional result of standstill agreement was acceleration of Communist Party's insurgency. The crisis of Nizam's regime allowed the communists to become virtual rulers of Telangana. So during that time, VP Menon was the embassy. So while briefing the American embassy just after the military invasion,
Conclude fast.
yes, yes,
No time for discussion.
yes, sir. 2 minutes. He stated that one of the reasons why it was necessary for the Indian government to march into Hyderabad was to put down the communists who were completely out of control in certain areas of the state. Menon promised that one of the first steps the Indian army would take after occupying the capital city was to clean out the communists and eradicate communism from the communist strongholds. So, in nutshell, what we can think is that even though in the initial stage, communists as well as Congress worked hand in hand to overthrow Nizam rule when Nizam was the ruler. But after overthrowing Nizams, what Congress has done is their immediate enemy was communists. So they betrayed their counterparts, their own comrades. So this he calls, passive revolution, the strategy followed by Congress in order to overthrow communists. So this is an interesting study one can read. So yeah. So all that I'm saying is the concept of passive revolution as a framework can be applied to study different political upheavals, be it social movement, political movements, or change of power from colonial time to modern state, transition times. These are different areas one can apply the concept of passive revolution to study these changes. So I am applying this concept of passive revolution to study social movement, that is Dalit movement in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So this is where we start.
Thank you. If anybody would like to ask question, briefly.
This is part of my study. So what I have spoken so far is part of my literature review.
Yeah. Anyone would like to take the lead? Any doubt? Any comment? Sir, it's clear. Is it clear to you what he said?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Any doubt you have? Any question?
No, sir, I don't have any doubts.
Okay.
Only 6 people, I think, excluding you and me, sir. So if there are doubts, it should be between you and me only. Looks like.
No, the net is creating a lot of problem because the net, they are not able to participate in discussions and debates,
Yeah.
Unfortunate.
Yes, sir.
The system is not carrying load.
Yeah.
Voice data, video data, they are not able to open easily because of the systemic pressure.
Need to do something about this, sir, because it's a big problem. How long?
This will continue end of next year, December 2021. The whole thing will continue and is so boring now.
Yeah.
Helpless.
And it's a big loss for master students, especially if not for PhD scholars.
True. MS students is a big loss.
Because apart from academics, they lose social life also. Because student life.
I don't enjoy teaching in this environment. I'm losing interest. Just imagine my interest. I'm losing interest in Gramsci.
Yeah. That passion is not there.
Online is simply taken away my passion.
Yeah.
I have lose it. I will forget Gramsci after some time. I tell you, it's so boring, and we are all frustrated by the whole event. What to do?
Just imagine
For
for
them to
people
get
who have joined last year.
students are big losers. I don't lose much. I don't lose my
Yeah,
career.
yeah, yeah.
But students lose their career, their knowledge.
Yes, 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 yes.
It's a big loss for them, not for me, not for teachers like us who will survive. The students, I don't think they will survive.
They lose their social life actually, their
These are assault
regular
on
interactions with their colleagues, the seniors, juniors, and their social life in Shopcom. All these things are lost.
loss for education. We have not measured so far. Gradually, we will experience.
Yes, yes, yes.
Now we are participating, but we don't know its impact. Is absolutely inestimable. You can't estimate
Yes,
the
yes, yes,
education
yes.
loss for students.
Yeah, yeah. Because they are completing their degree without experience, undergoing all this process actually.
Terrible, I tell you.
This is also kind of passive revolution. It's not complete revolution actually.
Technology clearly a passive revolution.
Passive revolution. It's not complete.
No.
You are getting something passively, but you are
Yeah.
not getting it completely. Social life is missing.
The purely
It is very-
technology driven medium. Students are made passive.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Already students are made passive in the formal classroom. Now you bring technology to make double
Yeah.
passive.
Yeah, yeah.
Now they lose the sight of the learning.
Yeah. Alienation from their own self actually.
Yeah,
Real self. This
Yeah.
is typical alienation that
alienation
Marx
of
speaks
self,
of.
yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Self
This
alienation.
he applies to study Fordism and all, Americanism and Fordism. During that time, Gramsci actually applies this specific aspect of technology.
Yeah, true.
Yes.
Okay, so if there is no question, we will close this session. Thank you, Anil,
Well, sir.
for giving a very elaborate talk on both idea passive revolution. And you said 10 features of passive. What are those 10? You didn't, you only
No, I
mentioned.
have read out actually. That's why actually slides would have been better, sir. Actually, if there were slides, sir.
Tell 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What are those 10? Just quickly, one by one.
I mean, passive revolution is a revolution without a revolution.
Okay,
First one. Second one is it's a model of political organization and revolutionary political technique. It's a political technique.
Okay.
Techniques. These techniques are pushed into facilitate a conservative modernization project. So passive revolution is a paradoxical combination of conservative aims.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes. Third one is passive revolution is a paradoxical combination of conservative aims and revolutionary means.
Okay. Third. Fourth.
Then fourth one is passive revolutions leave the outcome of passive revolution. So this is not actually characteristics. This is an outcome. Passive revolutions leave intact and may even strengthen the social and political power of pre-existing dominant classes. So this will be the outcome of a passive revolution. Then fifth one is it's a revolution that is directed from above by elites and occur without the active participation of masses. Then sixth one is a passive revolution is a historical process involving a set of gradual molecular changes in society. So in seventh one, in passive revolution, the leading groups exercise domination without leadership or dictatorship without hegemony. This is also another characteristic. Then eighth one, through legislative intervention of the state and by means of corporative organization, relatively far-reaching modifications are being introduced into the country's economic structure. So it's a state-driven revolution. So this applies to study Americanism and Fordism. The ninth one is passive revolution is involved whenever relatively far-reaching modifications in in countries' economic structure are made from above through the agency of the state apparatus, without relying on active participation of the people. Then 10th one is, in passive revolution, thesis becomes dominant and antithesis is rendered irrelevant. Consequently, thesis exercising dominance over hegemony, dominance without hegemony, absorbs the antithesis in order to stop a dialectical opposition. Then the main advocates of radical demands, 11th one, the main advocates of radical demands are absorbed by traditional classes, and by this weaken the very prospects of radicalization of any movement, as the ruling classes can make up for its limitations by using state power and neutralize or decapitate any emerging national popular bloc. So they decapitate the subaltern intellectuals, subaltern leaders, so that that movement becomes directionless or leaderless.
Beheaded. Ramsey is called beheaded.
Beheaded, decapitate or behead.
They lose their leadership. Yeah.
They lose their leadership, and then movement becomes directionless, basically.
Yeah.
So these are different features of passive revolution.
You didn't say 10. You said only for 1 and then moved on. You forgot that.
I didn't count the number actually.
You must present one by otherwise students will not get picture.
Yes, yes, yes.
Confused.
Actually, slides would have been better, sir. Actually, slides. I mean, PowerPoint presentation would have been.
Right, for that you should have come here.
Yeah.
Well, you can't use unless you are the host. You can't use share screen.
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm not aware of it, but probably you can't use. I don't know if you can use share screen. Can you use that? I doubt.
Even I am not much expert on this.
Share screen.
Mm.
Share screen. Can you click it? Just click it. Are you able to get? Let me see. Just click it. Click this share screen. See, there is a button.
Yeah, share screen is there.
Just click it.
Yeah. Then you have select a window or an application that you want to share.
You have clicked, na?
Yeah.
So it is open.
Oh yeah. Here you can actually PowerPoint you can do.
Then you could have done it. You could have done it. No, but in this case, your PowerPoint should be in the Google Drive.
Yeah.
If you check, for example, you have to upload a file. That from that file, PowerPoint file, you could upload it from Google Drive. See, it gives you option: upload a file or
Google Drive. Yeah.
So you can go to Google Drive and upload that file from Google Drive. So therefore, since anyway, so you could have done this actually. I have no idea. I thought you have to host to share the screen. Okay, so thank you very much, all of you. So bye bye.
Thank you so much for
Thank you, sir.
bearing with my presentation.
I hope students enjoyed your presentation. Nagasrao, did you enjoy or you suffered?
No, sir, I enjoyed.
No, tell frankly, be bold. Don't be afraid of your senior.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. No, sir, I enjoyed.
I'll ask you presentation. Remember, 11 teachers is told you next class one by one. I'll play out ask you before. Be prepared.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay, bye bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.